Cahirley. Unfortunately, Kerry's Deputy Palin Healy-Rae has left the chamber, and I would refer him to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate on Assessment, and in particular to their 5th assessment report, and just their headline, and he might read the details, and I'll give him a copy of it. And it is at least 95% likely that human activities, chiefly the burning of fossil fuels, are the main cause of warming since the 1950s, and they go on to give key indicators that have already been outlined by various deputies, in particular the Green Party leader. Ireland is party to the Convention framework on climate change along with 195 other countries, and that arises from meetings in 1990, and that was the turning point theoretically. And I say theoretically because since then our global emission rates have actually increased by 61% in that period of time. The debate is no longer whether our emissions are having an impact. The debate is over, and the question is now the severity of our impact and what window of opportunity is left in which we may still take action and learn to take responsibility as a country for our emission rates, which are contributing to global warming and over which we do have control. And while the acting minister has complimented himself once again in relation to the climate action and low carbon development plan, and indeed he deserves some praise for that, but on the other hand, the Act utterly fails to provide for the urgent action necessary. It fails to define what low carbon means. It has no legally binding carbon emission targets. It fails to recognise and provide for climate justice, recognising that those who are suffering and will suffer the most from climate change and global warming are the least responsible for global warming. Or, put another way, those least responsible and least able to withstand the impact bear the brunt. No mention, no provision for that in the Act. It does provide for an independent advisory council, but at the same time the Minister has utter control to remove the chairperson when he sees fit, and he doesn't have to follow the advice. And the Act utterly fails to recognise the urgency of the problem. In an article here by the Emeritus Professor in Maynooth, John Sweeney, again I refer to all deputies, he talks about a window of opportunity of 2 decades. We don't have any longer than that to take action, to achieve the radical cuts in emissions required to avoid dangerous climate changes. The Act utterly fails to recognise that while Ireland is a small country, it nevertheless has a very large carbon footprint. Each Irish person is responsible, this is only one example, for as much carbon emissions as 88 people in Ethiopia. 88. That's our carbon footprint, one person in Ireland. And as has been said repeatedly here, much of Ireland's carbon emissions come from agriculture, energy and transport sectors, and the percentages have been outlined. However, they are likely to increase right up to 2020. Also, Ireland meets over 90% of its energy requirements by importing fossil fuels, spending €6.5 billion per year in the process. And that agreement, a Cahirley, which I can't mention, which is known as the TIP, and which is very relevant to climate change because it utterly fails to provide for climate change and is being pushed by the fossil fuel industry primarily. But we won't mention it for the moment in deference to the chair, but let me mention the elephant. Let me mention the elephant in the room, which will be one of the main problems in relation to not dealing with climate change. And it's an agreement that the government is championing. Finally, I agree with the leader of the Green Party when he says this is a golden opportunity and we should be leading. It's an absolute golden opportunity, and to lead the way. And if I might be parochial, in Galway we're proceeding with what's called an inner-outer bypass at the cost of 30 million per kilometre for 16.5 kilometres of a road. Now, how that could match or how that ties in with our responsibilities to reduce emissions is absolutely beyond me. And yet that is what the government is allowing happen, 30 million per kilometre, and no provision for public transport until that road goes up.
Thank you, Deputy. I now call on